The Jazz broke the winning streak, which is huge. Gobert came back, and they looked a lot more confident, particularly on the offensive end, which I thought was interesting. Everyone talks about how Gobert brings effort on defensive, and well, not just effort, but a lot of talent and great plays on defense. But we often overlook his impact on the offensive end. And I don't think it was just Gobert's return that made the Jazz more confident. I think it was a lot of things. Uh, I know their last game, they played pretty horribly. So I think a lot of players came ready to play and were ready to play their best basketball, and it really showed. The Jazz played some excellent basketball. They beat the Denver Nuggets by 23 points, 125 to 102. And the Nuggets are a great team. And before I go on, I know I might forget this if I don't say this now, but just shout out to Nicola Jokic. He had an incredible game. He won the MVP, so we all know how incredible he is. But he had 25 points, 15 rebounds, 14 assists, and 2 steals. Um, that's one of the most ridiculous stat lines I've ever heard. That has to be a top 50 game ever stat line, I would imagine. Top 50 might be a little high, but that's an amazing game. Obviously, not good enough to win. The Jazz were just playing incredible. They were really playing their brand of basketball, and um, I'll jump into the team stats a little bit more because I think there's some interesting things to talk about. Some things that I think I might have been wrong about this whole season. I won't. Uh, it's an interesting conversation. I'll jump into that, but I'm on the box score. I wanted to remember Nikola Jokic, but while remembering one great center and how great of a game he had tonight against the Jazz, let's talk about Gobert because he had an excellent game. Not a stat line anywhere near as incredible as Jokic's, but I think his impact was near what Jokic had tonight. So Rudy Gobert had 18 points, 19 rebounds, 2 blocks, which that's almost 2020 game. We've not seen many 2020 games since like Kevin Love was on the Timberwolves. So Gobert's already had a lot of close calls with 2020 games so far this season. So um, it's great to see that. He had a plus 36 though. I know plus minus isn't the most perfect stat to show impact on the game, but a plus 36 shows that you probably had a really awesome impact on that game. Um, Donovan Mitchell pulled out 31 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. His shooting efficiency wasn't quite where we want it to be. I'm not complaining though. 11 for 24 really isn't awful. It's actually fine now that I'm thinking about it. His 3-point percentage was a little low at 33%, but he had a great game. Bogdanovic pulled in 21 points. Jordan Clarkson pulled in 16 points, 6 rebounds. So it was really a great team effort. Uh, the team had 51. The Jazz had 51 rebounds as a team, which is excellent. 26 assists, which I don't know the team average, but I think that's right about on par for what the Jazz get. So, um, uh, and I guess I'm just transitioning right into team stats right here. But before I dig too deep into the numbers, the Jazz were very confident on offense. I mentioned that um, they were composed. They were hitting their shots. When they weren't hitting their shots, they were getting offensive rebounds, or they weren't getting flustered. They were finding good shots, taking good shots. Like it looked like the Jazz were very comfortable in the offense. The defense obviously was good enough. They held the Nuggets to 102 points, which is a pretty good defensive showing, especially against a really good Nuggets team. But there were times where they were just it, they were missing assignments. They were looking a little bit lazy, a little bit sloppy. They were going under screens when they should have gone over screens. There was one thing that the Nuggets I noticed, particularly in the first half when the game was pretty close. They were beating the Jazz on jumpers, and the Jazz felt like they were really. It felt like they were kind of nervous of the Nuggets driving inside. Um, and they weren't playing up tight. They weren't putting any sort of pressure on shooters. They were going under screens. I was seeing all that stuff, and the Nuggets were punishing the Jazz for that. Um, I didn't pay like I didn't pay enough attention to this in the second half to know if the Jazz switched it around. That might be something interesting to go back and look at, but I didn't notice it as much in the second half, so that might have been what happened. Um, so defense was good. There were some sloppy plays, um, and in most teams in the NBA where they're really looking for 3-pointers and paint shots, and you have Rudy Gobert in the paint. Uh, I would I would think that you would probably want to play up tight on them and just kind of let them drive, and then be pretty casual on the help defense. Make sure you guard the shooters, so then you're forcing them into a hopefully a one-on-one with Rudy Gobert, which isn't a great matchup for almost anyone in the league. So that's what I would like to see more, especially when they're guarding shooters. But it worked out. I'm not complaining too much, and I'm not going to put too much blame on the Jazz when they've been like there's been not roster turnover, just a lot of roster changes with injuries and health and safety protocol and all that stuff. Um, Rudy Gobert came back this game, so they were trying to get used to a new rotation. Defensively, can be tough to make that work, especially with the Jazz, where there's so many weapons that they have on offense that any given night they could go off on offense no matter what the rotation is. So I said I had something interesting with the team stats. So if you've been watching these, especially my post games, you've heard me talk about this a lot. I talk a lot about the Jazz not shooting as many shots as other teams. I talk a lot about the Jazz turning the ball over too much. I talk a lot about the Jazz giving up too many offensive rebounds. And so this is something that I'm going to pay closer attention to, because I realize there's some factors that I've been neglecting and not talking about very much. So if you look at tonight's game, so turnovers, obviously I want lower turnovers, but really what matters is as long as we have less turnovers than the other team, or at least around the same amount. If we have 10 turnovers, they have 9, that's not that big of a deal. What I'm more concerned about is if the Jazz have 18 turnovers and the other team has 9, that's 9 extra possessions that the other team has. Same thing with offensive rebounds. If we have 1 and the other team has 0, great. I'm more worried about as long as they don't have tons more than us. So in tonight's game, the Jazz shot 84 shots. The Nuggets shot 95. So it's 11 extra shots. The Jazz actually had 3 more offensive rebounds, and they had the same amount of turnovers. And the points off of turnovers were really similar. They were pretty close for both teams, not enough to swing anything majorly. But the Jazz still shot 11 less shots. And so what I'm starting to realize, and I think I mentioned this a couple times, but I haven't been paying enough attention to it, and um, this may be I might be less worried about the number of shots the Jazz are putting up, because the Jazz shot 29 free throws and they made 22 of the Jazz have been a pretty good free throw shooting team. Not incredible. They don't hit every one, but when you're shooting 20 plus free throws and you're hitting 75%, that's a lot of points. So they shot 29 and the Nuggets only shot 8. So um, earlier in the season, the Jazz definitely had an offensive rebounding problem and a turnover problem. More recently, I'm not saying it's 100% fixed. I've been noticing this has been happening less and less. So I'm noticing fixes there. More confident ball handling, less stupid turnovers. Donovan Mitchell's a lot more confident as a distributor. They're finding other. Jordan Clarkson is um, I feel like he's become much more of a point guard kind of role at times. Obviously, he's a score first person, but I've been seeing him get more assists, get fewer turnovers. And so the Jazz definitely had that problem. I'm not saying I was wrong in the past, but I am saying I was neglecting some factors, which were free throws. And there may be other factors, but I think that's the biggest one that might be swinging things, because I was saying the Jazz can't be winning games if they're not shooting as many field goals. And it's because they weren't rebounding enough and they were turning the ball over too much and not forcing enough turnovers. Now we're seeing the Jazz are still shooting 11 less shots, but it's just because they go to the line. And when you get fouled, you miss the shot. That doesn't count as a field goal attempt. So they may still be getting the shots up. It's just not counting on the stats. So that's something for us to look out for. The Jazz may just be a team that are really good at getting to the free throw line, and they're a good team from the free throw line. So that is a great way to get some bonus points, because if you just look at the team stats, you want to make more shots than the opposing team, which the Jazz did, even though they took 11 less. If you make more threes, those are bonus points, and then free throws are kind of bonus points to get that final score. Free throws are great ways to get points, and so that's something I'll keep an eye out for, because it seems like the Jazz have not. I don't want to say solved, but they're fixing their turnover problem. They're fixing their rebounding problems, and they showed that in a great game tonight. After they lost 4 in a row. They lost 5 of the last 7. They got a big win against the Nuggets. Nuggets are a big team every time we play them. So great win for the Jazz. I'll kind of wrap it up there, but I'm hoping, like, let me pull this up real quick if ESPN will let me. ESPN always likes to run slow for me. But we talked about yesterday in our weekly episode the Jazz's schedule, how right now it's not the easiest, but they kind of have a fairly easy stretch compared to what's coming up. And so let's go over that real quick. They just beat the Nuggets. They're not an easy team, but they had a great game tonight. They're playing Los Angeles tomorrow. The Lakers. There's 2 Los Angeleses, but they're playing the Lakers. Obviously, you can't count the Lakers out ever, but the Lakers definitely aren't playing as well as most people expected them to. The Jazz should come away with a victory. Then we have a couple easy games: Rockets, Detroit. If we don't walk away with wins there, there's an issue unless Gobert's out again, or Mitchell's out, or there's some major injuries or whatever. But if everyone's healthy, or everyone who played tonight is healthy, I'll say it that way. If we better beat Houston and Detroit. Those are must-win games against much inferior teams. But then coming up, we have Golden State, Phoenix, Memphis. And then we have Denver, Brooklyn, Golden State again in the next 6 games after that. So the Jazz have some tough games coming up, and this is where they're really going to show who they are as a team. So it's nice to get this win. Hopefully they can win the next 3 games, and then we'll see what happens with that crazy tough schedule. We're in the second half of the season now. Things are going to start getting serious. If the Jazz need to hold on to their standings, really start mattering now, because in 10, 15 games from now, you're going to start seeing, maybe not that early, but possibly you're going to start seeing some teams eliminated from playoff contention. And pretty soon after that, you're going to start seeing some seeds start locking in, and you're really going to understand what range each team has. So this next stretch of games, I know there's still a lot of games to play, but these wins are going to be important come playoff time to see what seeding is. I know this is going a little bit over, but seeding might not. The seeding conversations are going to be really interesting this year, because the West is going to be very deep. You're going to see teams like Denver and teams like the Clippers, who they're not great in the standings, but they're going to get some star players back before the playoffs. And so what their seeding is going to be lower than how good of a team they're actually going to become playoff time. So the seeding is going to be really interesting. The highest seed isn't necessarily going to be the best seed, but obviously you want to play for the highest seed. At this point, you don't know what's going to happen. Play for the highest seed. It gives you home court advantage. So, I don't know. Some interesting stuff, some fun stuff. I'm excited for what's going on. I know these past few games were rough for the Jazz, but we saw some really good stuff from this game. I'm excited for it. And Rudy Gobert, there was a fun game to watch from him. He hit a like 3/4 court shot. Didn't count. He released it late, but good stuff this game. I'll wrap it up there. This was a really refreshing win. A lot of fun stuff. A blowout win against the Nuggets. So I'll wrap it up there. Thanks for tuning in. Everyone who made it this far, like, thank you so much. Yeah, and stay tuned for tomorrow's game against the Lakers. We always love playing the Lakers. We always love beating the Lakers, so that should be a fun one. I believe Nate should be taking care of that one, but thanks for tuning in, and go Jazz.